right from the bat, this may be scary for certain people. I've always wanted to do this. This has been something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, and it's about all the ghost stories that I've heard in my life. They were real things that happened to people, or at least they think that happened to them, and they would have been second-hand experience. So basically, I was in these places when these people told me these things happened, or I was very close to that person that it happened to. And the weird thing is that a lot of these people would say that they don't believe in ghosts, which is odd, and it's so Irish because it's such a contradiction. And I'm not going to reveal any names as such. I can maybe mention about my father, but like anybody, or my uncle, but anybody that's like that told me stuff that are not like of close family, I won't reveal their names, and I won't give away exact details, but I will be telling the truth. Like I just have to be careful. I'm going to start with one that happened in one house. There's a few incidences that happened. We were staying in this house at the foot of Mount Brandon near the Owen Moor River. And we used to go there every summer. 37 now, so it was like 30 years ago. Different times, you know, like it was like early 90s, mid 90s. And we were given lots of responsibilities, you know, as kids and when we grew up into teenagers. So there was one time my dad used to rent out the house. So it was a big house. There was like a separate place where we used to stay, kind of an office / living area, kind of garage turned kind of apartment kind of a thing. And then there used to be the main house, which we used to have access to as well. But there used to be people like renting different times. There was different people renting there. It was like people getting away from the city for a couple of summers or whatever, or for a summer. So this peculiar enough situation where there was this doctor from Dublin that was living there. He was renting from my father. We were sitting around the table one day at lunch, and we used to kind of have like lots of fish and bread and, you know, just kind of simple kind of lunches, right? So it used to be a lot of tinned, like we used to get the tinned meat or the tinned crab meat or the tinned salmon, and then sometimes we'd have fresh salmon or fresh trout that we'd cook. But I remember specifically eating like tinned crab meat, right? Next thing, the doctor's there and my brother's there. I think my brother's there and my father's there. And next thing, like the doctor turns around to my father very nonchalantly, like very kind of like matter-of-factly. He goes, Bertie, you won't believe what happened to me last night. Like, he goes, I woke up in the middle of the night and there was a man standing in the corner of the room. And I was just like in a state of shock. I was just like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, what man was this? And my father was like, you know, I can't really remember the exact reactions, but I remember my reaction, which was like in shock, because I was wondering who was he talking about. And then he goes, but I kind of shook my head or something to that effect. And he goes, but then he just disappeared. And I was just absolutely traumatized when I heard the story, because I was very young. And I don't say this in a way where it's like, oh my God, it was terrible. It was like, I think the paranormal and the mysterious was always something that I was fascinated by. So it was always something that I was intrigued by. So I wanted to hear these stories, but I didn't want to hear them. Do you know that kind of way? And I will give some context as well. There was talk about this house being haunted. When the doctor said this, I was just like, when he said he disappeared and my father reacted to that, I can't remember exactly what he said. No, my father, I'd say he would just reacted, sure, you were probably on drugs, or you were probably drinking, or you were probably doing this, you're probably doing that. And the doctor was like very kind of like straight-laced. He was like, no, that's not the case at all. But anyway, it was kind of confirmation for me that there was something going on. But I remember then kind of knowing in my own soul, like this place there was something haunting about this place. And actually, I used to be terrified of upstairs. I used to like going upstairs. I don't know, maybe because I knew these stories. And used to have to go upstairs to go to the toilet. There was only one toilet upstairs, and it was horrendous, like, you know, in one way, but like in another way it was intriguing, you know. So during the day, just to say it as well, during the days we used to have so much fun. Like we used to be fishing and playing, and even we got involved with selling the permits and stuff, so there was responsibility there. He stayed in the back corner room, and that's where I would never go in there, like. And I remember there was times I had to stay in other rooms when there was a full house and we used to have to stay in the other rooms, and I would just always be terrified. I'd have the blankets over my head and I would just be snuggled up, but just wouldn't move. Like I wouldn't move a bone, you know. I was so scared. But the older I got as well, the more I kind of got used to it, and I don't want to put across a thing where it was like terrible. It was all very intriguing. Myself and my brother were staying one night. He was out and we had the radio on full blast. Daniel was staying with me. We were staying in the kind of office / living room part of it. There was sleeping quarters there. And I just remember hearing footsteps, and the stairs were kind of very like hollow kind of wood, like, so it was very clear, the steps. And I don't know to this day, was I imagining it or did I just think it or did I actually hear it? But like, I don't know why I would just make it up if I didn't hear it. You know what I mean? It was so long ago. And I think I'm nearly 100% sure that I asked, and I remember because we used to have the lights on as well. So we'd have that place kind of closed. And I think Daniel may have heard it as well, and we chatted about it, and you know, we just tried to forget it just because it'd move on, like, you know. I think I looked at the clock and it was a certain time or whatever, and I said, I think I was rationalizing then at that point, saying, oh, that's dad's back, but we didn't hear any door, we didn't hear any of that, you know. And the next morning when I asked Dad, like, what time did he come back, he said, oh, I came back at 6 or whatever, and it was 4 or whatever by the time I heard this. So you get me, it was like, again, this was confirming something was going on, you know, in the house. And the third scenario that happened was with my uncle, and this was probably the scariest thing, because it was very much a person having an experience and I'm seeing their reaction to this experience, and it was during the day, which was terrifying. And this really kind of stuck with me forever, you know. I think with these scenarios, it's like I'll never forget them. They're so etched in my brain, you know. I was in the kind of I think we were open for business, so we were in the garage kind of part, and I was sitting there. I was like, we used to read magazines. It was simpler times, no phones, no nothing like that. It was very much, you had to kind of entertain yourself in very simple ways, you know, like basic things, you know. And so I was just hanging out doing that, and my uncle was upstairs in the toilet. I'll tell you the aftermath and then I'll tell you what he said happened. So the aftermath was, he came down and he came through the place where we would have slept that night I was saying to you about what happened to us. But this was a separate time. I don't know if it was close and it was a different time, but I'm just saying he came through that place, came out into the garage, and he was not looking well. He looked white as a ghost, you know, pardon the pun. But he was like, did you come up and say something to me while I was on the toilet? And I was just like, no. I said, I've been here the whole time. And I don't think anybody else was in the house at that particular time, because it was like, really, he went for me, like, he was like, and it was very serious, you know. It was like, it wasn't the fucking messing about kind of a thing. It was like super serious about this. And he was like, Bertie, I'm being serious, did you say something to me? And I was like, no, I didn't say anything. What happened? And he told me what happened. And he said, and he mimicked the voice that he heard. This, and I'm, for some reason, I remembered times, this was like lunchtime, like 1 or half 1 in the day. This is what was scary about this situation. And the weird thing is, if you ask my uncle now, can he even remember? He can barely remember these things. It's amazing. I think when you're young, these things imprint in your mind so much more. When you get older, you start forgetting things. You know, 20s, 30s and 40s, and someone asks you 20 years on, it's harder to remember exact details. But when you're young, you remember everything. And I said, what happened, Don? You know, and he said, something told me to get out. And he mimicked the voice, and this is what he's mimicked. And I'm just going to say this is a little bit terrifying, but he just said something just went, get out, like that. I mean, people will have explanations for all of this. They might say, oh, someone else is in the house. Well, from what I remember, nobody else was in the house. Daniel wasn't there. I think he was with Dad. He was probably fishing or something. I certainly didn't do it. That's a fact. And this was during the day. And he was terrified. And my uncle did not say to me at any point anything about supernatural stuff happening to him. This was like a random occurrence. and it wasn't kind of something where we were telling him all about this stuff. Maybe he knew about this thing, but took notice, but it was a very much a random, surprising thing that happened. And it kind of always stuck with me that, And it really compounded the fact that that place, for me, was haunted. And I remember, I'll never forget, I was with a girl, just dating a girl one time. And we went back there, and it was about 2 or 3 years ago. And we stopped at the house, and every time I stop at the house, like, it's totally boarded up now. It's like in bits. It's really sad, actually. Like, it's a shell now, you know what I mean? But even when you look in the windows, you can still see some of our stuff there, like, which is quite weird and creepy. Like, the stuff that we had like 20, 30 years ago, you can see some of the stuff is still in there. Like, it was like totally abandoned, the house. My father, that job just fell apart, and he went into the security industry. So anyway, like, the point is that, like, there's this ominous, not that ominous, there's a presence about the place, but I feel like, I always felt like that we weren't not wanted in the house, that we were wanted there. It's still a kind of a scary place, So yeah, that's the story about the ghosts, about Clahan.